I've been tasked with the introduction today, and I'm excited for it. So I will say welcome to the College of Architecture and Design at Lawrence Technological University in the virtual world. Welcome to those joining on, well, I guess to all of you joining online. Um, Afterwards, recording will be uploaded to the Lawrence Tech YouTube channel. So if you want to rewatch or share it with friends, please do so. Uh, as soon as that is done, you'll see it there. And I don't need to use this line because we're all online, but if you want to silence your phones just in case so you can focus on the talk today.
Close
So
all your other windows. Just
yes,
kidding.
close windows. Yes, yes, yes. So good afternoon, everyone. We appreciate all that you could make it, all that could make it. Michigan weather did not disappoint, so we had to pivot to the fully Zoom format, but we're prepared for this outcome. My name is Kurt Neiswender. I'm an architect based in Flint, Michigan. I'm also assistant professor of practice here at the College of Architecture and Design. At the college, we believe that the future of design is multidisciplinary, and we host a range of design degrees that include graphic design, industrial and transportation design, game design, interiors, and architecture. We track design future trends, emerging technologies, and advancement in practice as a means of crafting education approaches in these areas. Our Design X Technology lecture series allows us to engage in design discussions and offer broad perspectives on where we are headed. There are a couple of upcoming COAD lecture events to keep your calendars or block out in your calendars. So the next lecture is a week from today, weather permitting. We will do it back in person and online, but Thursday, February 13th at 12:30, Senior Experience Design Lead at Dolby Laboratories, Alejandra Castilao, will present a lecture titled From Craft to Strategy: Lessons from a Multidisciplinary Design Career. And then on Monday, February 17th, our Design X Technology lecture presents uh, Ah Ahla I'm going to really butcher this, but Ahla Amiha, professor and distinguished chair for resilient places at School of Architecture, University of Utah, will speak on innovations in architectural design, research, and advanced technologies. So, a couple of really interesting topics coming up. But today, we have Evelyn Lee will lecture on the ideas on designing careers, shaping futures, lessons from an evolving architectural journey. And then we will definitely save time for some Q&A at the end, but since we're all on Zoom, please, use the Q&A throughout the presentation. Evelyn is totally open to, fielding questions, and I think it will generate a much more engaging and, immersive virtual experience. So, a short introduction of Evelyn for you. Evelyn M. Lee, FAIA, is a multifaceted professional who uniquely blends her architectural background with a tech-driven focus. As an architect now immersed in the tech industry, she serves as an angel investor, startup advisor, and fractional COO for small and medium-sized uh, businesses of architecture, excuse me, playing a pivotal role in their growth and success. Despite her career transition, Evelyn's passion for architecture remains unshaken, fueled by a deep admiration for the professionals in the field, their dedication to serving clients, and the indelible impact they imprint on communities. A sought-after speaker, Evelyn regularly shares her insights on the evolution of architecture practice, leadership, and team development, the integration of technology and practice operations, and the exploration of alternative careers. Outside of her architectural pursuits, she is a founding advisor for Women Defining AI, championing a more inclusive and diverse landscape in artificial intelligence. Evelyn Lee's leadership and forward-thinking approach are not just about innovation and progress. They are about guiding the architectural profession towards new and uncharted directions. So please help me welcome Evelyn Lee. This
Hey.
is the virtual clap time. So let me share. I have the ability to share the slides. So let's get right into it, Evelyn. All right. So we've kind of done something a little different for this. We're going to have a bit of a conversation in three parts. And so the first part being careers. So Evelyn, why don't you tell us about your career path and trajectory? Um, and I will move through some of these images that you've shared with uh, some of the non-linear approach to the career path.
Yeah, no, I think one of the things that I want to stress is that my career has been very nonlinear, and I've kind of bucketed it into these 5 areas, right? So my education, which got cut off a little bit, but I'm still able to talk to it, architecture, and things that are more architecture focused, writing. I love to write. um, Architecture and which I would consider more architecturally adjacent, and then how I found myself in tech. So the last full-time job that I had as an employee was working actually for Salesforce, following an acquisition of Slack Technologies, and we can talk a little bit about that. Um, so I bucketed this. Now you all know how old I am by these buckets. I did it in fives. So I have my BArch and my MArch. I did my BArch at Drury University in Springfield, Missouri, mostly because they allowed me to play soccer and do architecture at the same time. And then I went and got my MArch at SciArc in Southern California. At the same time, I started writing. And that's why there's this timeline. Writing has been a thread throughout all my career. It's how I've figured out who I am and how to and really figure out my voice. I'm a rather introverted person, so writing has become a way to for me to digest things and get them out into a public in a forum that I probably feel most comfortable in. Um, I ended up going back to school and to pursue my MBA and my MPA uh, in my later 20s when I realized that I didn't want to practice traditionally anymore, and I couldn't figure out where I fit in architecture. So I actually took a break altogether for the first year of school. I said, I'm not going to be part of any green building club. I'm not going to be part of any real estate development club. I went all in on what is consulting and marketing and and entertainment, because I was at UCLA at the time. And then what I realized is I really missed my architecture friends, and I wanted to ultimately figure out a way to support architecture. And that's when I launched Practice of Architecture in its first iteration, which what it really was just a catalog of everything that I was reading and in business school that I wish that I had been paying attention to, or that I thought architects might want to pay attention to. Uh, and that was the initial launch of Practice of Architecture. Um,
Did I just jump too far?
no, that's fine.
Oh,
I think, oh, are we missing? We might be missing a slide in there.
ah,
No, I
should
might be missing a slide.
I?
Um, when I came out of architecture school, I went and I worked for a company called MK Think, and I ran a strategy group for 5 to 7 years. The reason why this is a little bit pivotal is that, or particular, is that the strategy group grew out of what is considered traditional practice. And it was specifically looking for opportunities for architects to expand our products and service offerings beyond traditional practice. What it gave us the ability to do is charge more to clients that were already hiring us for architecture projects. because we were providing different types of services. And when most people think of strategy groups, they think of very large firms. So all of the large firms have some type of strategy, the Genslers, the Perkins and Wills, the HOKs, the HKSs, etc. Uh, MK Think was as small as 12 while I was there, and we grew to as large as 40. And we were also the highest revenue generating studio of the practice too, because of the way we were able to leverage our fees. But anyways, I did a lot of things there. There unfortunately wasn't room for growth. I found myself in workplace strategy, which is how I ended up in Slack. Um, so the way tech companies grow so fast is the first office manager at Slack a year later, her title was Global Build of Design and Construction for all offices. So essentially, she did the first office move, and she was in charge of design and construction of all future moves going out. She was programming everything in Word. So she would give architects a program saying, we want 4 small offices, we want, or four, five small conference rooms, 1 large conference room. And inevitably, they were getting conference rooms and offices that were all these different sizes. There wasn't a great balance between how many desks they need versus how many conference rooms they needed for meetings. Technology was dissimilar across all of our offices. And I was brought in to put a nice wrapper on all of that and to create operations, processes, and policies, which is kind of where I completely geek out on now when it comes to supporting businesses. But then the pandemic happened. So my role changed and evolved. I began to support the overall employee experience, which moves into also kind of employee policies. Eventually, it made me a part of the return to office and workplace conversations. And Slack really began to lead the way and have a voice in what is the future of work and how does work change and evolve. And my work went from purely the physical office to how do I support the entire employee experience from people getting onboarded to what does growth of the employee look like over time because turnover is really high in tech, to even what does offboarding look like so we give them a good experience if they ever want to come back. And that's also when I launched my podcast, Practice Disrupted, was during the pandemic. Sorry, that was a little longer than I expected. So then here's where I am now. I left Slack. It was interesting because I was a part of this group called Future Forum at Slack. We were very focused on what does the future of work look like. Forbes magazine held up Future Forum's research against what Mark Benioff at Salesforce was saying the return to office policies were. And all of us kind of realized because they were at odds with one another, there is no environment within the company where we can continue to talk about what we believe to be true about future of work versus what Mark Benioff is making Salesforce employees telling them to do regarding the future of work. So the entire team, Future Forum team, actually decided to leave Slack and go their own ways. And that's when I went all in on practice of architecture and supporting other small and medium-sized architecture firms. And being a foundational advisor to women defining AI. So this is just all to say that I was one of those silly people, maybe not silly, but I knew from a very young age, like in 4th grade, that I wanted to be an architect. And as soon as I actually got licensed, it was when I was struggling with whether or not I found a place in architecture, and I didn't feel like there was a place for me. So I did a lot of exploration, and this is where I ended. But no career path is linear, is really the short of it.
Yeah, thanks. And I think that will be a nice theme, and something that we talk about with students very often. And we've got some questions coming up
I know, leave it
regarding.
to Cormac to throw in a question.
Oh, yeah.
So, so Cormac, just in case you all can't see it, Cormac asks, can you talk about how your nonlinear career path has positioned you perfectly for leading the AIA and profession forward in an ever-changing climate of the AEC professions? I would say, for me, having stepped out of the architecture fear sphere into the world and understanding how AI is evolving, as a for instance, just gives me an outside perspective on how I think the profession needs to move forward. Somebody was saying that they enjoyed my um, posts on LinkedIn, and they're very thought-provoking. And I think it's more just about how do we get out of kind of we think very myopically about architecture. I think the nature of our work has us heads down in our projects all the time. So I'm the one with my head always up, looking, seeing what's coming down the pipeline next, and hoping to share all of that with architects as they kind of figure out their own careers, and as we think about how practices need to evolve to remain relevant. So, Cormac, hopefully that was the answer. Hopefully that answered your question. Kurt,
Yes.
did you have any other? Oh, are we going to jump to two?
Oh, well, I think yeah, I think we should let's move into the second section, but bring with us the idea of the nonlinear career path and the sort of range of what you know set up in the first section regarding your own personal experiences and choices in where to engage in those different avenues. So let me do a little setup, right? I think part of this conversation is about um, you know, you can do anything with a degree in architecture, and within our own college of architecture and design, right? We have multiple disciplines, and the excuse me, so slides moving. um, and we like to think at Lawrence Tech that we have this ability to sort of offer those kinds of opportunities, and borrowing this you know quote from you or through Michael Speaks, you know, the architecture degree is the ultimate liberal arts degree, which I found a fascinating way to put it. And so, what we can do in the arts better than the scientist, and science and better than the artist. And so, um, you know, while I have, you know, a few more images, is there anything that you could start to describe in shaping the future of practice? You know, resilience is a very big topic right now, and I think there's a few different ways to look at it. And then we can sort of segue into that role of AI potentially, but I can get to that in a second. So,
Well, I would love if you guys want to put in chat, like how many of you had professors or somebody that's told you you can do anything with your architecture degree. I feel like I got told that often in school, and I didn't get told that enough when I entered into practice. I think when I entered into practice, everyone was like, how are you doing on your AREs? How are you doing towards licensure? And it was this very linear career trajectory. And it took me a while to understand, and it took me a while to think about what else could I be doing since I've committed so much of my life to pursuing architecture. And that includes like a whole a year, a 5-year bachelor, which is already a year longer than most of my peers, and going through AREs, IDPs at that time. Um, and nine, I'm one of those people that say back in the day now, when there were 9 AREs, and the California supplemental exam. So, 10 to get my license, and then to decide to leave. So the interesting thing is that Michael Speaks was my professor. He was head of the master's program while I was at Syracuse. He's now dean at Syracuse. And he says that he says that about 50% of his students, and I did kind of a little bit of a straw poll last night at dinner, are entering the architecture degree program without ever intention of pursuing architecture or traditional practice afterwards. And if I were a firm leader out there, I think that's kind of a big that's going to that has huge workforce implications. Not to mention there's an upcoming enrollment cliff, right, where we're going to lose 10 to 15% of just applicants because people weren't having babies during the recession, frankly. So there's going to be even less workforce to draw from. So the bigger takeaway, I think, is that architects, and I don't know, Kurt, if we had that slide in here, but we aren't competing with just ourselves
Mm.
anymore for talent, right? We're competing with other industries for talent. So usually I preface this slide by saying, warning, there's a provocative statement coming. Um, but this is the average salary, starting salary, and this isn't high, like it's actually, I would say it's a little higher in like areas in California where tech is big, of UX designers in new out of school. And, realistically, can architect salaries compete with that? And what does it mean for our practices if we can't? What gets more scary is this next slide, which is essentially my benefits package, which is offered to anyone when I was at Salesforce, right? So at the time, there was no need for me to be in office. In fact, we had offices globally I could drop into whenever we want, 100% healthcare coverage. Um, 40 hours of VTO is something that I always get a question on. So that's 40 hours of volunteer time off. So um, so Salesforce will like do these trips to Belize to build water wells, for instance, and you could go to Belize for a week as and do 40 hours of VTO. So when you think about our ability to compete with all of these other industries, like that's where that's where I'm concerned about how architects and the architecture industry continues to remain relevant, especially if our workforce is going elsewhere. So Lee Sue just said McKinsey hired a bunch of my classmates out of like straight out of grad school.
Right. Yeah. That was like one of your other examples, and I'm just throwing it back to this idea of the threat versus opportunity, right? So when we just talked about the competition to other professional uh, uh, pathways that we might be competing with, I would definitely say that our opinion here is taking this as a step toward opportunity rather than the threat, right? And seeing how even last night, right, as you said, when we talked with the students, it was actually kind of a mixed reaction toward, um, they were a bit unsure about their future trajectory. And as an example, one student saying all things being equal would probably choose to design and build furniture, which personally I didn't think was a bad idea in that it's using the same skills and tools that we teach in the school and what we use in the profession. And so I think I think having that level of understanding even at this stage in the students path at the moment, and and so I know we shared some of these statistics, and I do think, and I do believe you think too, that our profession has the ability to sort of say rise to the occasion, right, and meet that as an opportunity rather than a threat. Would you say?
Yeah, but I think it is a strong mindset shift. And if we want to, if I mean, Kurt, we can turn these slides off if we
Oh,
want. But if you want to dive a little bit into kind of AI applications, as a for instance, right? I think so much of architects and what we've been focused on with architect, like with AI, is how we will or will not use it as a tool within our current scope of work. For me, AI offers the ability, one, for even the small and medium-sized firms to begin to compete more more directly with large firms. So there's an interesting, I feel like a democratization of design tools, and the ability for one person to do a lot more, which is really interesting. But then if you actually extrapolate and look beyond it, a good friend of mine, Eric Cecil, just posted an article in Common Edge, and he actually thinks the next evolution of AI, because there's a lot of chat about AI agents in the world, for instance, um, and even going back to my Salesforce example, Mark Benioff had said, you're going to have AI teammates now. So if you keep extrapolating it, potentially, especially for large developers and large real estate holders, you could actually potentially have an AI agent as a client of yours. So I think those are things that architects aren't really thinking about. Like instead of an owner's rep, like what if you're having to interact with an AI agent as an owner's rep? But so those are the things that I think we need to be thinking about when it comes to how this technology can not only be leveraged within architecture, but how other people may be leveraging the technology to interact with us as architects.
Do you think we had a bit of a conversation last night also, I think in relationship to say, AI as an evolution, um, a new tool that is sort of emerging, and but what about this? I might sort of fumble a little bit in sort of the broad definition, but Web 3.0, or this idea of building this knowledge base, what we study through school, through practice, and we've built up this body of knowledge that either could be used to, say, train our own AI agents. I know you mentioned that there are some firms that are doing this already, but then also using that body of knowledge to continue to share information, um, on your own platform as an individual, or even firms, building their own, sort of shareable, or you know, being able to not, you know, hold tight this information to the chest, but maintain that relevance through sharing information. Does that
Yeah. Well, I
make
always thought it would be incredible. And if anyone out there wants to build this with me, please get in touch. But I always thought it would be incredible to have this, like, how there's the IMBD, the international, like the movie database. If we could do something similar for architects. So as you as an architect could see, like have your bio clicked on and see like every building you've worked on and what role that you've had as on that building throughout your career, I think is um anyways, there's definitely a lot that can be done sharing things. But the other opportunity when you talk to love about leveraging AI in your workplace or in offices that aren't really utilized right now, I think is as its own internal agents. So I posted in the link to the Common Edge. I posted in the link to Canon Design. So Canon Design also they launched Billy, which is their generative AI companion. And if you think about it, I used to have to respond to RFPs a lot working at MK Think. And a part of that was, they would ask you things like how much square footage has your firm designed in this bucket in office design, or how many real estate development dollars have your projects like cumulatively, what does that up to? And I would have to no one would ever update our Excel database of where this information would live at the end of project, right? So you have to go through and look at drawings, specs, anything you can on projects to pull out this information. But what if you had all uploaded all of your firm's information into its own local database, so it's only searching locally, and you could ask that set of knowledge, questions about your firm, right? How often we copy and pasted and used this detail over and over again on all of our projects, as a for instance. And if this detail has evolved and changed over time, which aspects of the detail are we evolving and changing the most? But I think there's opportunities to leverage AI in that way that can help support what firms are doing and even actually like completely respond to an RFP by looking at the history of how you've responded to RFPs historically. And then we always have a human in the loop, right? So then you can go and say like, oh, and you can go and make corrections and edits to the RFP instead of building that out from scratch every time.
When you mentioned that to me, I thought, well, that's great because it already these things are starting to exist, and people are sort of jumping on board with it. And before we move on to the next section, I think it still might be a nice segue is to hear your take on how, especially with your own background in the pursuit of the MBA and the strategy work, is the mindset of entrepreneurship within architecture, right? So there is, practitioners and our students that become, you know, professionals as soon as they graduate and move into their licensure process. Um, but then that interest in becoming the owner or the business owner of of their own company or within firms at a larger scale, but within practice, many architects are hesitant to do that. I wonder if we might start to see a little more energy with some of the younger generation having more interest in that. But do you see, um, you know, any of these topics that the AI and the sort of internal um, software components helping make that leap or take that shift, from employee to entrepreneur or innovator?
So I mean, we have a slide in here, Kurt, if you want to bring that back up about, it's in the next section,
Uh,
though. Um, Zach Soflin
Give me
of
one sec.
Layer. No, that's fine. Um, so yeah, so I think, there's an argument to be made that we should be teaching more business in architecture school because we don't know enough business. I would argue that we are teaching all the right things in architecture school because architects can go off and do more things. And there are models, for instance, there where architecture firms, um, and go off and for instance at MK Think, we went off and supported things on both sides of traditional practice, and then we found ourselves in the owner operator seat. Um, Writing the RFPs, but essentially by doing more work, we were actually able to do more of the architecture work that we wanted to have a voice in. Um, but Zach was his firm. So he worked for a small firm. Shoot, this is a bootstrapped company out of an architecture firm in Nebraska, and they were supposed to go out and I think they had to document all the buildings in the state or in the county, and he's like, there's got to be a better way, a better system to do this, and Layer became that system. And then from that, he grew it into this software program where now you can essentially leave meeting minutes in the Revit model, and you can click on the meeting minutes in the Revit model, and it's shared with the entire team, which is that's a very simplistic view of what Layer does. But for me, there's a difference between, do we need better managers in architecture to run more profitable firms, which I absolutely think we need. But I also think there's this, where can we be even entrepreneurial and think about more products and services that we can be creating, that expands the scope of what we do, gets us paid on a more regular basis. Layer is on a SaaS model, so a software as a service model. So it's a monthly income stream. Um, but also so it diversifies our holdings, but also actually gives us more realm, more control over the data and our manipulation and what we can tell our clients about the built environment. So I don't know if I answered your question. That was a very talking about a nonlinear, there's a nonlinear answers.
No, I think it's a good example. I mean, we'll dive deeper into this section too, but I want to pick up just a chat, from Zach here talking about business should be taught early, and I wonder if this is a way to sort of extend that answer. Within we talk this probably conversation comes up a lot. There's pro practice classes, what we call professional practice classes, but there's no business courses in the curriculum of an architecture school. But do you think, as Zach is mentioning here, that we should include business and bring it in early into the process? And
I
and
think,
was that part of like you in your format, you chose MBA to add on to the architecture degree.
yeah. Um, yeah, and Zuby asked me a question. Am I saying that right?
Yep.
He actually asked, like, why did you leave practice to pursue an MBA? At the time, honestly, Zuby, I didn't know what I was doing next. So going back to school was a great way to explore that. He also asked, why was there no room for growth at MK Think? Frankly, there wasn't room for growth. I could become a partner, but they were never going to make me a partner. Or I could become an associate principal, but they were never going to make me a principal. So they weren't thinking about succession plan then. And I didn't know if I wanted to keep fighting that fight. So that's ultimately why I left. But I guess what I'm back to business, what I'm saying is that the business that most practitioners and most architects want taught in business school, I would argue, is not the right type of business that we need to be taught in order to think about more entrepreneurially about how architects want to expand how we practice, might be a little bit confusing, but I think the business that everybody wants to be taught in architecture school is how to run a better practice. And I'm saying the business that architects need to be taught um, is how to be better entrepreneurs and develop new products and services, because that's going to be what we need to survive and really thrive as things are evolving around us and how we keep it up. So so I don't think adding business in architecture school is honestly necessary, because I actually feel that the design thinking that you guys are being taught in studio is kind of the most important aspect, and it changes how you think differently from anyone else. No other degree program puts you through something like studio. Think about that. So everyone's like, we need more business and
Right.
architecture, but you have like the one degree program that offers you an education that you can't get anywhere else, and it's in a studio environment.
And
Uh,
and oh, sorry,
yeah,
did
go
I
ahead.
cut you off? I was just going to
Oh,
say, we have about 15 to 20 minutes left
oh, we're
and
almost there.
one
Yeah.
section, but given that we're fielding questions throughout this whole time, it's been great. So please, everyone, keep them coming, but we'll still save a few more minutes toward the end. But I think it's a great segue to our last segment within, evolving the journey of architecture in the professional world. And you mentioned, the skills that we learn in studio as unique to architecture, and this slide sort of describing not just problem solving but being system thinkers, community builders, implementers within the professional world, and how we can fit into that. We already talked about alternative career paths or adjacencies to architecture with layer, and there's a couple others. A natural, I feel, and
Um,
our friend, a friend of ours, Jamie, and I definitely, talk a lot about the film industry and set design as a pathway. Um, and then there's other professional models like Architects Fora, which if you can describe a little bit more about what they do and how they sort of decided to approach the profession from a different perspective.
yeah. And I just wanted to finish off the business conversation by saying essentially, I think you guys are learning what you actually really need to learn in school and in studio. Um, Smart business people bring in the expertise that they don't have to fill their gaps. I think one of the things architects struggle with most is they try to do it all. And they believe that what we deliver as architects is so unique and specific that no one can help us with marketing, no one else can help us with project management, no one else can help us XYZ. But the smart business people bring in people to strengthen their ability, and we don't have to do it all. So I would say, um, yes, we should be the master builder, but I would just say that master builder is a little bit different, but I would just say that we don't have to do it all. We don't have to learn business in architecture school. What you're learning is what you need to be learning based on what is happening in the world around us. But bring other experts to the table if you do want to start your own firm. Um, and partner. There's somebody coming on my podcast, and he who founded a tech company, but we talk about him being a non-technical founder because he didn't know how to code, but he had the idea for a product. So he found a co-founder that was a technical, and this happens all the time outside of architecture. So if you don't have the expertise, partner with the right people to get you to where you need to go. Anyways,
Yes, thanks. Thanks for
so
that.
that's what I'm trying to say. You are learning what you need to learn in school. You don't need to learn new business.
So we don't need to throw out the whole curriculum. Okay,
No,
great.
no. There are tweaks that I mean, everyone I think could suggest tweaks, but Architects Fora is a unique thing, and I wanted to, I'm going to maybe to the dismay of some of the practitioners that we have online, but I wanted to throw in their foraship. So Architects Fora is a women-run firm, and they are entirely remote, and they were entirely remote before the pandemic. So any firm that comes up and tells me we don't know how in this new hybrid and remote environment to usher new hires along and to train them, I'm telling you there's firms out there that are doing it. So for those that can't figure it out, know that firms that are out there doing it are going to beat you. Architects for it is doing it, and they have this wonderful architects. They call it the Fora-ship. It is for specifically for minority students, but it's an internship. It's a year-long paid internship at $25 an hour. It's a full-time summer internship from June to August that becomes a flexible part-time position for the following school year, August to May. They are entirely remote, so you can be working from anywhere. And on top of that, they give you a $3,000 scholarship. So they do this once a year. It's very competitive. They are an amazing team, and they are working. And the other thing is a lot of remote studios tend to be high-end residential. Architects Fora is working in like one of the most difficult verticals, which is sustainable, multifamily, um,
Oh,
affordable
yeah.
housing.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
the affordable housing market is
So I'm just saying that there's for everyone who's like, I don't know how to do this, we need to bring everyone back to the office. Just be aware that there are firms out there that are doing this in a completely flexible environment.
Yeah, and I think the innovation of Architects Fora goes back to this, right? Which is the confluence of community building, system thinking, and then implementing those as uh, business model and strategy. And I think I will since, just for the sake of time, and then if there's anything else that you want to cover, you know, please go ahead. But you brought in this last slide that kind of spoke to me regarding this intersection between design and business, and you quoted the Thomas John Watson Jr. from IBM, good design is good for business. And so the two don't have to necessarily um, be siloed or separated from each other, but the two, can benefit each other.
Yeah. So I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard this, or maybe you've even found saying yourself saying this, but good design is good for business. I don't know if you guys want to raise your hand or, say in chat whether or not you've heard people say that. The interesting story about that is Thomas John Watson, he's the IBM chairman from 1952 to 1971, is coined as saying that phrase, but he was inspired by an architect to say that phrase. So in 1956, he hired Elliot Noyes, who was an architect and former curator of the industrial design at New York MoMA. And he hired Noyes to develop a corporate culture, to design a corporate culture, everything starting like literally the design of the letterhead to the offices. Noyes was the first person, and IBM was the first company of its kind to kind of create a corporate design program. And Thomas Watson was also known for partnering with other architects. So he actually believed that good design is good for business. And it's just a nice story because it was inspired essentially by an architect. Um, so good design is good for business, and architects can go out and do more good
Oh,
design.
and there's a new question in the Q&A here from Eileen. What was the catalyst for launching Women Defining AI, and how can those who are interested in attending any upcoming events? And
So the catalyst was started. So I'm not a founder. Um, I don't claim to be a founder. I'm a foundational advisor, which is a little bit different. So I'm going to drop the link for Women Defining AI in here. So the interesting thing is AI is such a nascent tool still. And even similar to how architects and the architecture industry struggle with how many women are at the table in leadership and participate within the industry itself, tech finds itself in the same spot. So with AI being so nascent to the general populace, we were interested in encouraging more women to get into the field of AI to close this technology gap faster. So that's what Women Defining AI is about. It is a paid subscription. Um, it's so it's there. So to be a part of the events, you kind of have to join. I think it's I am not in charge of what that subscription is. And we haven't honestly, we to the men listening, we haven't really fully figured out what how to support allyship. So we're definitely working through that. But you might be interested in one of the here is somebody outside of architecture that is shaping this, our cities going forward. So one of the co-founders of Women Defining AI, her name is Nicole Sterling. I need to look her up, but she started a company out of that grew out of like just everything she learned at everything she learned in this community called My Town AI. And what she is looking at doing is creating digital twins. There's her LinkedIn. She's looking at creating digital twins for small cities. So essentially, how can small cities and counties leverage digital twins of the cities to make decisions about where they spend their money. And she has no background in urban planning or architecture or anything. She served on her county council and she learned about AI and she's like, this is what we need to be doing. But if my town goes big, my town's going to could have potential huge implications about the built environment in a lot of different cities. And that's why we need to be paying attention to what's going on outside of practice. I think
Yeah.
it's a good full circle.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. And then since we still have a little bit of time, I want to make sure that everybody who's on um, gets to ask a question. So if you're dying to ask a question, please drop it in either the chat or the Q&A. We've got it open, and we still have 7 minutes technically, but I'm sure if there's a few extra minutes. But while people are doing that, I did want to ask this last question. Given from the beginning, we talked about the nonlinear path through the profession, and sort of evolution of the journey of architecture and where you see things going. But let's take the sort of reflective question, and so if you were to go back to the younger you and give yourself some advice, what would you say uh, now that you've made it this far in the career trajectory? And so that's the tough one, right?
I mean, it's not tough. So I mean, I would say to all new grads out there, there's not a one size fit all, or to all the students that are listening, and even to mid-career professionals, because it's interesting. I've talk about um, talk about a watershed movement moment and people leaving practice. I'm getting more mid-career professionals reaching out to me asking like talking about stepping away from practice. So that should also be scary for practitioners. Um, but your career isn't linear. There isn't a one size fits all. And I feel like when I graduated, I tried to fit myself neatly in a box, and I never was able to correctly find that box. Um, so I would say, there's ways to explore and prototype new ways forward. If you're interested in going to business school, but you don't want to commit, go to the local community college and take a few business classes, right? So there's ways to prototype what is my next step without fully committing, and figuring out what that is to find out what you're most passionate about. You'll ultimately thrive in an environment where you're following and doing work that you are most passionate about. The other thing that I would have to say to everyone is that you should treat your career like it is a business. Ultimately, business owners, even if they consider you family, even if they say the business is a family, will need to make decisions that are best for the business. And that may mean laying off individuals, whether they want to or not, in order for the business to survive. So you need to treat your own career like it's a business, but also realize that you don't have a decision to make until you have a decision to make. And that was a lesson that was really important that was taught to me by my husband. So for if you're ever thinking about, should I leave? Should I go look for another job? We don't really have a decision to make until you actually have another job in hand to go to. So don't be afraid to explore that path and see what that next path could lead you to, because you don't actually have a decision to make until once you're either laid off from your current job or you have a job in hand to move to. So those are
Great.
those are the tidbits that I always throw out.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. Now we're getting flooded with questions, so this is great. Um, do you want to pick at them at any particular order, or do you
Oh,
there's some in the
um,
chat and some I probably should have focused
on
them.
both. Um, did you find these same during the brief time in a traditional? I felt through my career in architecture that the culture of architectural office was somewhat stymied by outside influences, liability, contractor relationships. I mean, yes, I think, Adi, like a lot of people feel that. And I think that's the impetus for a lot of people wanting to leave and find work elsewhere. I went and worked at I went and I had an opportunity to work at Slack at a very unique moment in time because there are horrible tech companies to work for out there. Let's be honest, but they're also wonderful, similar to architecture. There's horrible companies and there's wonderful companies that you can work within. So you just have to find the right fit. Um, honestly. So back to treat your career like treat your career like it's your own business. Go look for something. If you're not happy there, it doesn't mean that you're not necessarily happy in architecture. It just might mean that that's not the right firm for you. Um,
Can we run? Can we come to Mark Farlow's question? Because I know it was up early in the chat, and I don't. He put it back in the Q&A. I don't want to overlook it. It might be
yeah,
a bit of a tangent, or
yeah,
but
and I preface this by saying LTU invited me here as a not wearing my AIA hat, but so AIA issued a memo back regarding federal projects. So we are going to be playing defense. I would say at the federal level, and we are going to be doing everything we can at the state and local level to play offense. And that's what we're going to have to do the next 4 years. But we already released a memo, and I don't know, Eileen was amazing about putting things. I don't know, Eileen, if you can help me find that memo, because that was not a memo that I had, a link that I had ready to go. But we did already, I mean, we have a very strong position um, on that during the first administration. We have an equally strong position on that during the second administration, and we will continue to maintain that position. I hope that's, yeah. Well, Mark, there, yes, I mean, we responded. What is your option on an alternative, what is your opinion on an alternative path, nonlinear path to licensure? Well, I come from a state that gives you a very nonlinear path to licensure. So California is one of the, I think, 13 jurisdictions that still allow you to get licensed through experience without education. So I know NCARB's last president, for instance, was somebody that did that in California. So I'm all for that as well. Um, I don't know. I'm I'm just gonna leave that answer there. Um,
do you want me to read them off to you at
is
all,
there
or
anything else?
do?
Yeah.
Um, let's see. There. It's so great to have so many. Well, Zuby had another one. I thought could be interesting. Maybe not. Does the AI salary calculator do a disservice to the industry? Is it, this is relative to the slide regarding the UX designer salary. And so
Well, no, I mean, I
there's
think it's
num
honest. I think we need to know where we stand. So you also have to take the salary calculator with a certain grain of salt. So for instance, there's only um, the data in it is only as good as the data, like the data that comes out of it is
available.
only as good as the
Yep.
data that goes into it, right? So if only, for instance, large firm individuals are responding to this, our salary survey on an annual basis, figuring out even the pay discrepancy between large and smaller firms are going to be, and benefits there are going to be a little bit wonky. And if you're in states, you're from states where it's not as heavily populated by architects, it might be a sum of or an average of 5 people versus an average of like 100 people in a city like Los Angeles too. So take it with a grain of salt. But I think I am somebody that is all for salary transparency for equity and inclusion's sake. So I would say it's better for us to show more greater salary transparency than less salary transparency in general.
All right. If there's any more, please drop them in there. But I do see a lot of thanks and appreciation for your insights and talk. And I want to also thank you. I mean, I forgot to mention in the beginning that, through our own AIA committee work, we've known each other for 10 years, and so I am glad to call you a friend. And I appreciate that you shared the stage with me, which is a little atypical for our co-ed lectures. Um, but I appreciate the opportunity to be able to sort of ping pong and play off of each other with that and our shared experiences. And yeah, let's see. I think those are all the questions. Any final thoughts for the parting?
No, I mean,
before we part?
it was an anonymous. However, my
Oh,
salary
I'm sorry.
is more to be desired. Are there any additional income streams you could recommend to people with full-time architecture positions? Uh, um, Moonlighting. Um, to do moonlighting, well, I don't encourage moonlighting. I encourage you to talk to your employer. But I think there's a lot that you can do in addition. So I've always written as a for instance. And I wrote for blogs. I wrote for Inhabitat way back when, before people could even believe that you could make a living off of writing for a blog. So I've always had an additional income stream of writing. There are definitely younger architects out there that have their own income stream selling 3D print. Um, like the I don't this is how non-technical I am as a woman defining AI foundational advisor, but essentially selling the script for 3D print models,
Ah,
so that me as a mom could send something and print out a new toy for my kids to play with, as an example. But I think if you just look around, there's a ton of things that you could do to apply your architecture degree to that doesn't go head to head with what your employer does for work. Um, beyond architecture, that would honestly probably give your mind a creative rest from the daily grind of projects. And you might find greater creativity coming back to your projects because of it. I don't know.
yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm glad you found that. There's so much
Yeah.
activity in the chat. Well, I think that might do it since I probably could keep you for a lot longer, but I don't want to because that would be unfair. But I think I'm always bad at the goodbye. So at this point, right, I leave it with the final slide of just thank you. So
Yeah. Thank you all for tuning in today and for spending time with us.